Over the last 20 years, a lot of changes and improvements have been made in the TruScreen device. The first was to make it a far more user-friendly device that could be used basically as a handheld device rather than have it attached to a computer. And then secondly, to improve the algorithm in such a way that there was less noise from inflammation and repair and things like that on the cervix. Once those changes had been made, we had to validate that the device still worked robustly, that the algorithm performed as well as it did, or if not better than previously. And so over the last, decade, but the last 5 years in particular, we've been doing a lot of work in the clinical setting, both here and in our remote clinics, looking at the performance of the device and validating the algorithm. So our data basically shows that with all of the changes that have been made and which make it a far more user-friendly device, that the performance of the biophysical screening is as effective as it ever was. So one of our key focuses in screening using TruScreen and in the Australian setting is for our rural and remote communities, and in particular within those communities, Indigenous women. The incidence of cervical cancer is still substantially higher among Indigenous women and among women in rural and remote communities. Part of the difficulty there is just accessing care, but then also having results back in a timely way that allow women to have screen-detected abnormalities dealt with in a way that isn't terribly inconvenient for them. TruScreen has really performed well in that context, and we continue to use it in those settings for that purpose in order to assess its performance for those higher risk communities in the rural and remote settings. Cervical cancer around the world still remains one of the most common cancer killers of women. It is truly preventable. After 70 years of cervical screening, we've had dramatic declines in cervical cancer incidence in resource-rich countries, but in resource-poor countries, in the low and middle income countries, cervical cancer is still by far one of the biggest cancer killers of women. The main difficulty with cervical screening in these settings is establishing laboratories, training personnel, keeping those personnel in the facilities, getting women along to get screened, and then waiting for the results and getting them back to have appropriate responses to screen-detected abnormalities. The big benefit of the biophysical screening tool is that it gives an immediate result, it is painless and well accepted by women, and a decision can be made in relation to management actually at the time that you have the patient there. And so it takes out many steps and is cost effective even without that step saving, but with the step saving makes it a very inexpensive way of screening.